So did that training teach you to deal with this wonderful uncertainty of being an entrepreneur?
So I am wealth, I am wise, I am more than enough.
Safe to say that US might not be the sole superpower anymore.
The idea of not being in love with your plan. And if things aren't working, you need to track it, you need to measure it.
How far should you go to defend your freedom?
If you simply recognize fear as a sensation that you're experiencing, does not mean it has to change anything that you do.
Hello and welcome to Inception to Infinity. I'm your host Anupam, and this is a show for entrepreneurs and aspiring individuals. There's a version of success that the world hands you, and then there's a version you have to find yourself. The one that starts not as a plan, but with a signal, a quiet but persistent signal telling you what you're supposed to seek. I can say that I have pursued both these versions, and what I have learned is that the second one is the only one worth talking about. Today, we have the pleasure and honor of having a very special guest. Before I introduce him, I want to say this. There are moments in your life where the direction you take is not shaped by opportunity, but by conviction. The moments that you don't drift into on a path, you choose it, fully aware of the cost. For some people, that moment comes quietly. For others, it comes in response to something that changes the world. Today's guest made that decision in the aftermath of the September 11 attacks. He chose just not to serve, but to walk directly into the conflict. Please join me in welcoming David Shoup. He is a former US Marine. Over time, his role has evolved from being on the front lines to training others, teaching advanced combat tactics, and leading in environments where the margin for error just does not exist. And then, for good reasons, he made another transition from the structure of the military to the uncertainty of being an entrepreneur. The risk looks quite different, but the stakes, in many ways, still feel just as real. Today, David is the founder of CA Business Formations. He helps entrepreneurs take their first step, the moment where an idea becomes something real. Today's conversation is about decisions. It's about walking towards risk, whether on a battlefield or at the beginning of building something from scratch, and about what those experiences teach you about leadership, fear, and responsibility. David, welcome to Inception to Infinity.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to talk about these topics and even the things that you're bringing up, the conviction, the decisions, like that's such a huge part of it. So thank you so much for the invitation.
Amidst your wonderful introduction, it might be lost on the audience that you actually are a licensed attorney who knows many more things beyond structuring a business. So I did want to highlight that particular credential of yours, David. I'm proud to call you my friend, and I can't wait for this conversation to learn more about you and bring it to our audience. Let's start from the beginning. You walked into a recruiter's office with a very specific request: send me to the infantry. It wasn't like, let me go see how it feels like. Nothing passive. Very direct, very intentional. What was on your mind?
That's a really interesting question, and it wasn't even like I had a family or background in the military. You know what I mean? Like I was one of the first.
How old were you at that time?
17 years old, and I'd always been raised and taught that military service and defending our country is the military man basically, or woman obviously, but the military person, right, is one of the highest things that you can do because freedom isn't free. Right. So that was kind of my structure going in. And so when 9/11 happened, I was not gearing up for the military. I was actually going in to study theology and to be a minister for my church. Kind of a big difference, right? But then we were attacked, and I thought, you know what? It's time to change. It is, this country needs protection, and it's the sacrifices of the few that protects the many. And so that's why I made that decision. I went in there and I said, I want to go to Iraq. I want to go fight. And the recruiter said, I got a job for you.
So how did it go?
How did it go? It was quite the culture shock, because when I went to the recruiting station, I wanted the hardest job. I wanted the most challenging. I wanted the most difficult, and so that's why I went into the Marines. And it was just a complete lifestyle change from, living in the suburbs and just, I played a saxophone. I was very, I would not say an extrovert, right? I was very introverted. And to go in from that into, the Marine Corps kind of, environment, that was a big shock for me, but I loved it because it was that connection, that bond. I could feel that on day one.
So there's a concept of a war, of a conflict, of going to Iraq, as you said, the culture shock. And there's a reality of actually risking your life on second by second basis. When did you actually, when it hit in your face that, my God, this is what it actually is?
I think I actually picked up on that the first day that I was in Marine Corps boot camp, right? So the Marine Corps boot camp is a very specific methodology to strip away everything that you think you are and build you into the warrior, right? I mean, it's just that Marine Corps has been doing it for a long, long time. And the Marine Corps is, one of the most successful military branches on the planet. And so on the first day that I was in my platoon in boot camp, it is very intense, to say the least. And that's when it really hit me. I was like, wow, this is like, I'm doing this, right? There's no turning back. The drill instructors are everywhere. And it was pretty intense. So that's when I started to really kind of pick up on, I'm not in the suburbs anymore. You know what I mean? I'm on a Marine Corps base, and it's victory or victory. There's no other way.
So I have never come even remotely close to the level of discipline required to be a Marine Corps person. I have heard some people talk about it, like standing in freezing water for 6 hours, or regardless of how fatigued you are, you must make your bed in the morning. And of course, there's nothing called saying no. You have to try and get to the extreme end of your physical and emotional and intellectual stamina. The most important thing is that the decisions you're making there, they have an immediate consequence. It's not like making an investment and saying, hey, I got 10%. So that awareness of almost like an animal instinct that, hey, I do this, this is the consequence. How does it shape your mindset? How did it make you a different person?
That's really interesting. You know what? I learned a much different thought process. See, in business, as a business owner, you're kind of measuring, you're calculating risk versus reward, whether a strategic advisor, a CPA, or, a broker or whatever, right? There's a lot of measurements and analysis, and you bring a lot of advisors in, you can bring your board in, a lot of different things like that in the Marines. And when you're in combat as an infantryman or whatever, those decisions are in microseconds, right? Like, we're talking, you need to, this is why Marines spend thousands of hours rehearsing and drilling and practicing, training, right? So then when that event occurs, it's an immediate response. Your nervous system, your skeletal system, your muscular system, everything will operate in unison immediately upon the occurrence of one thing, right? That's why, for example, when the enemy is engaging, suddenly, like a surprise attack or an ambush or something like that, the Marines operate in one immediately because they've been so well trained. And so that decision-making process is, you act first according to this ingrained system that you have, right? And then you kind of figure it out along the way. But like that battle plan is already like in you. You know what I mean? So like, that's a very different process as opposed to a financial analysis or tax plan or something like that. So it's really interesting the differences. But it also helps me make really good decisions. I don't overanalyze things. I'm able to look at something very clearly, get the relevant information, and then either apply that to my practice or myself or whatever. I just make my decisions very fast, and I know exactly what I want.
How important is intuition in situations like that when you are in a do or die confrontation or combat situation?
How important is intuition? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah,
Yeah,
at that time.
that's a very interesting question, because I would say it's pretty important, because you kind of like these like whether it's special forces or general infantry or whatever, you do have like kind of this sixth sense. You can kind of see things coming from, especially for the more experienced ground fighters, where they can see things and analyze them, and they kind of have a sixth sense about them. I would say that's actually fairly important. That's almost impossible to train. That comes from years of experience and being in the trenches, so to speak, or literally in some cases, to learn those kinds of skill sets that could apply though in all areas of life though. So that's it's a pretty powerful concept.
I have always been curious about how people get comfortable with a situation in which they have to actually kill somebody.
Mm,
When you sign up for what you signed up for and you show up on the combat zone, you are ready to kill someone, right? If need be, not your first preference, but if need be.
right.
Is that a massive wall you have to climb? Is like climbing Mount Everest, or is it like survival instinct? Either you kill or you get killed.
Right. That's interesting. A lot of people process that in different ways, which is also a big part of whether they experience PTSD or not. Right. It's the how does your system process that kind of trauma? Right. I would say it's extremely difficult, if not impossible, to remove that sensation from someone of loss or regret, or these kinds of things, right? Because we're all people at the end of the day. Even the most highly trained Navy SEAL, that is a human being, right? And they have a mother, they have a father, they have maybe siblings and friends and family and loved ones, children at home, that kind of thing. And the requirement to take someone's life is extremely traumatizing. But some people, what the military attempts to do, which sometimes it doesn't do a very good job, is to build that resilience mentally, so that you're able to quickly kind of push through and accomplish the mission. And then that's where it at times will lead, or a lot of times it will lead to struggles back at home when you get home, and these kinds of things, right? That the military does not prepare you for, right? So they train you to go to war, they don't train you how to come back. You know what I mean? So that's another project that I have that I'm very passionate about, is helping combat veterans with PTSD. But just because I know that and I've been there and I've gone down that road. So that's a very interesting question that you asked, though.
So we have other things to cover, so I'll keep moving. Most people like me, I'm a civilian. I sit in the comfort of my house. I know you guys are taking care of us. So thank you again for taking care of us, you and your entire community. I always salute all the veterans when I see them. A common person, regardless of how well educated they are, they think in terms of there's a strategy to the war, there's operations, there are outcomes. After all that, still there's a human factor to it. You experience, as you talked about, PTSD, you experience fear, you experience many, many other things I can't even imagine. Watching movies is a very poor example of understanding what actually happens there. Not that they're not important, they're useful. We can all watch Saving Private Ryan or anything else we like, but ultimately it's way different. Now, once that's done, once the battle is over and you have moved on like you have, and you live a civilian's life today, what stays with you long, long after those years on battlefield?
There's actually I'm glad you've asked that, because there's several things that I would say have stayed with me, and they will always stay with me. They're a part of who I am, right? So it's just like it's ingrained in my system, but now I use it in a lot of different ways versus before, right? So it's kind of something that's learned, but I don't choose to unlearn it, right? So the things that I've really learned that I love and has been very useful in my life as a husband, father, business owner, investor, Marine, whatever, is the idea of certainty, focus, decision making, leadership, right? Resilience, having these kinds of things. And I think really just the determination, right? We're going to accomplish this objective no matter what, right? There is no failure, right? We will keep pushing no matter what. Like that, just ability to push through anything, right, is extremely useful in life. Because you can't be beaten if you don't quit. You can't be beaten if you don't stop.
You also have written a book and you work a lot on helping veterans.
Mm.
What is the book about and what else you're doing to help the veterans?
Mission Freedom. Mission Freedom is a book for combat veterans specifically, but it'll actually apply to anyone that has seen some traumatic events or experiences. I mean, I've people have asked me about domestic violence, traumatic divorce, those kinds of things, childhood stuff, and trauma is trauma, right? It's very similar. But the book is about specifically how to annihilate PTSD, right? Because there's a common belief in our culture, right? And it's more international. I mean, this is a worldwide belief that when you're experiencing trauma and you have PTSD, it's permanent. It will never leave you. This is now a part of who you are. In fact, a lot of veterans believe that it is who they are. And if you've done any kind of mindset work or whatever, you know that that's extremely dangerous to associate a traumatic event as a defining part of who you are. You'll never remove it from you. So my book, Mission Freedom, is about that complete liberation, the complete freedom, the system that I built over years of just working on myself. I fought PTSD for 15 years. I battled everything. Nightmares, flashbacks, the whole thing, right? I was in and out of the hospital a few times, psychosis. I mean, it was intense, very, very intense. But during that darkest point of my life became actually the best part of my life because I was able to develop this system for complete liberation of PTSD. And now I train and I teach and I travel and, I was on the stage of NASDAQ and New York Times and that kind of stuff, talking about the system of complete liberation, rewiring the nervous system, right? Rewiring it so that PTSD no longer exists. It's not something you have to cope with for the rest of your life. So I'm extremely proud of that, helping our heroes, first responders. I mean, it's police officers, it's firefighters, it's paramedics. It's these are our nation's heroes, whether they're overseas or right across the street. That people that deserve something better for themselves, and they're told things that aren't true. And Mission Freedom is about really helping them have that best life by liberating themselves from kind of a shackle, that PTSD that they think they have to carry, but they don't.
Initially in the conversation, you said something which stuck with me. You said freedom is not free. As a matter of fact, we are in a war right now. It's a very expensive war. We are spending $1 million on a missile, give or take, to shoot down a drone which costs $10,000, and that cost is pretty steep. You have moved away from that war zone now. You have an economic perspective. Every country pays some toll for freedom. Either you ally with somebody else, become a part of NATO, or you spend 8% of GDP in your defense budget. From a philosophical perspective, you were going to study theology. You said, what is a fair price of freedom for a country, for a person? Like, how far should you go to defend your freedom?
That is a very philosophical question. I love it. How far should you go? I mean, I guess we would have to define for the person what freedom actually means for them. You know what I mean? Like Mission Freedom, my book and my program and my cause and everything like that. It's about personal freedom from the past and those kinds of things, right? Are we talking about freedom to trade? Are we talking about freedom to live without oppression? Are we talking about freedom to construct your own, military system or economic balances or whatever? You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, I think it really depends on, well, how are you defining freedom? What are you presently lacking, right? And then, therefore, once you determine that little bit more of a situation, really what you're pursuing, then we can actually have a conversation for, well, what should we spend? Are we willing to sacrifice 100, 200, 500,000, a million lives of our generation, of all the generation, kind of like in World War II? You know what I mean? Like that's very different rather than, well, I want the freedom to extract oil or, protect against a threat that may or may not be real. I'm not getting political in any way, shape, or form, but it's very different rather than being attacked by an insurgency force or having a military base bombed. These are very, very different things. So I think that's really what it comes down to actually determine the answer to that question is really what's at stake and what are you really pursuing? And then we can have a conversation for what should the cost be for that? How far should we be willing to go? Does that kind of make sense?
What was that transition like for you? Like you went from being super disciplined and you stayed disciplined on the other side, or you started taking liberties you were not taking earlier? I mean, I have seen you as a very serious and sincere person. I have seen you so many times in person. Was there a certain amount of freedom you felt becoming an entrepreneur?
That's very, oh, I love that question. Kind of going back to all the way back to maybe 2012 is when my wife and I started conceptualizing and really kind of planning out our first business. 2013 is when we kicked it off, and we started this business in like basically our spare bedroom. We were true startups. I previous to this, I had no background in entrepreneurship or business owner. There was no one in my family that was a business owner. Basically, you would work 9 to 5 until you got to whatever retirement age, or there's not even pensions now very commonly, but basically you get your retirement, you get your 401, and then you just work until you can't, or whatever, that kind of mindset. So going into from that, like you pointed out, extremely structured environment, and then going into have at it, like let's see what you can do. It was very challenging from the beginning because it is a change in mindset, right? It's like I'm creating my future now. I decide what my future will be. I'm going to decide my outcome and then plan the steps to get there, and those kinds of things. So it was a little bit of a change, but what I would say is that my kind of a military certainty and like very objective oriented, that focus, that determination, that drive served me extremely well. And then I had to learn a lot very, very quickly. I engaged in several coaching programs and kind of learning, hire some consultants or whatever to teach me how to be a business owner, because I didn't have any the foggiest clue. And my wife had been a former bookkeeper, done some accounting work for a bank, and so she had a little bit more on the financial side, which is extremely useful. But she still didn't have any idea on how do we lead a staff, how do we determine a strategic business plan, what about the costs and revenues and financial projections and all these things. We had to go through that through the school of hard knocks, right? And then also hiring consultants and things like that, to like courses and things like that, to learn as much as possible, which has really served us well. So it's a really interesting transition. Some of it applied, some of it was like, we're just going to see what happens, do the best we can, which is sometimes that kind of mindset is extremely useful as a business owner.
So, for all the differences in the two, there's some very exciting similarities, that the outcome is always uncertain in war, in business. You best laid plans can go awry. Um, what is that feeling like? Do you sometimes feel that, oh my God, this is like being in a combat zone? I did plan this, I launched this, and the results are like completely different, maybe better, maybe worse than what you anticipated. So, did that training teach you to deal with this wonderful uncertainty of being an entrepreneur?
Yeah, you know what? It really did, because, you have to be flexible, right? But you also have to not be overly committed to your plan, right? In the military, or especially the infantry, there's this concept of like, you got the best plan until the rounds come down range, and then everything goes to shit, and and then you got to think on the move, right? So while it's not that kind of extreme in business ownership, the idea of not being in love with your plan, and if things aren't working, you need to track it, you need to measure it, and then after that, you just kind of see how things are working, and then you adjust, right? Someone who's going to follow their plan all the way into bankruptcy, they had many opportunities along the way to adjust, right? So that flexibility and constantly analyzing it with trained professionals, you know, um, I mean, that's critical, right? So many people don't do that, and they make a lot of mistakes. They lose a lot of money. They lose a lot of time, right? So in the military, it's the same concept, right? We've got our plan. This is what we're set on. We've trained, we've rehearsed, whatever. But things are going to break. Things are going to not go our way, whatever. And so then we need to adapt, operate as a team, and then proceed to develop a new plan in very chaotic situations.
I have a little personal curiosity. Do you still retain that wonderful habit of sleeping at the same time, waking up at the same time, making your bed every morning, or have
That's
you kind
funny.
of like eased up on yourself?
Some things have stayed and some things have not stayed, right? Right. So I do adjust the time that I wake up, but I do have certain routines that I will follow no matter what when I wake up. Can I share one with you?
Please do, because I see you as a very muscular, well-built, disciplined person who always eats in a very precise way. So I would love to hear what is keeping you in that wonderful shape.
Yeah. So, well, the first thing you got to take care of is up here, right? The biggest weakness or failure or reason for success for any business is the owner's mindset, right? If the business owner operates from a sense of scarcity or a sense of lack or loss, that business is going down. I don't care. I don't care what's going to happen, right? Or it won't be as profitable, or it's going to hurt it significantly in some way. It won't grow. It's going to reach a cap, that kind of thing, because of the business owner, right? And obviously, it depends on the size of the business, but you can think of Elon Musk and all the other big names. If they had a serious mindset issue, those companies would not be as successful. I don't care, right? So what I do is I train and I hone my mind the second I wake up, right? So on my wall next to my bed, I have a wall. I have a wall there, and it's got all these different incantations that I do, like upon waking up. It was my feet hit the ground. I'm making what I call my power move. I'm pumping my fist. I'm shouting yes, those kinds of things. The second my feet hit the ground, it's a ritual. I won't not do it. It would feel strange not to do it. So I'm pumping energy and certainty and focus into my body the second that my feet hit the floor. And then I start doing incantations that are all put all over my wall. I've got I am statements. I've got power virtues. I've got, my various identities that I thrive on. I've got the focus. I got my targets. I got my goals. It's all there. And I'm drilling this stuff I tell myself how I'm going to experience the day through the lens that I've created. And that right there I can't tell you the benefit that has had on me. Now I'm ready to go, right? I don't care what happens. It makes no difference what happens, because I am prepared mentally to go through anything and with a smile on my face, so there you go.
Would you feel comfortable acting out one of those for our audience so that they can see the ritual you put yourself through?
Sure. I mean, actually, it's kind of interesting. So right above my screen here, right on my wall, I have, my I am statements, right? And this is, so I do it in two ways, okay? And or two kind of series. I do my I ams, and then I do my bees, okay? So like, for example, some of the ones that are my favorites are I am wealth, I am wise, I am more than enough, right? I'm a winner, I'm strong. Let's see, I'm an achiever, I'm fearless, I'm abundance. These are some of my I am statements. So I do those first. And I do them with physiology. I'm beating my chest. I don't want to, I don't want to scare my staff next door, but yeah, I am beating my chest and I'm intense.
I know people have seen Tony Robbins. Don't be scared. Tony Robbins does it like very, passionately and publicly.
Yeah, exactly. And then I order my system with bees. I said, be strong, be decisive, be a winner. I'm pointing to myself, right? Be it. You will be it, because I'm in charge. I decide, right? And you will do what I say, because I'm in charge, right? So I hit these be statements: be fearless, be abundance, be all these things, because your system, if it gets used to being told what to do, it will respond, right? You're basically dictating your experience and who you are, right? When you do these things, it will unlock so much in your life, right? It's simple. It's a piece of paper. It's an 8.5 by 11 Microsoft Word. How long did that take me, right? To create that? Not hard at all.
So this is a very important topic, at least in my experience. The way you start your day is so formative, foundational, and really, really important. Increasingly, we see that people are willing to let go of that wonderful window. Like, we have great books like 5 a.m. Club, Miracle Morning, and I can go on talking about that all day. In all training and leadership management, the mornings have been highlighted as the time to start your day right. But yet, I think a huge majority of people wake up and grab their phone and they let go the control of their day. Tell us, what is, I always see you as a hyper prepared person at top of energy and game. Um, Tell us about keeping in mind the people who are not doing it. Like, what difference does it make? They're like, I'm starting with Facebook or Instagram.
Yeah.
Highly reactive. You're being highly proactive in building your. You almost remind me of Stephen Covey, who wrote that great book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
There you go. Yep.
First chapter, be proactive. So, what is that morning doing for you, and what are people missing out on by not taking charge of their day first thing in the morning?
Yeah. I mean, you're basically dumping stress hormones into your bloodstream when you do that. When you go into the, Facebook or Instagram or whatever, that thing has trained you like a gerbil, right? I mean, it's just like, and it's just like this, you get the stress hormone dumped into your system versus what I do. I am putting immense power into my bloodstream. I don't know what the neurochemical is for that, but dopamine or something, right? So, right. So, I mean, I am deciding the second that I wake up who I am and how I'm going to respond, right? I mean, I focus. I have a wall of like other things on there is my core virtues and my what I call power virtues. You're familiar with that, right? So, and I'm picking them. I'm picking which one am I going to focus on today, because I don't want to try to make it too complicated either. Make it simple, right? Some people have a limiting belief that everything has to be complicated. It can't be that easy. It can't be that simple. It's got to be hard, right? And that is a significant limiting belief. So you got to get rid of that, right? Like, let's keep it simple. The simplest strategies will win the day. Just like, for example, provide more value than your competitor. Not that hard of an approach. Obviously, the execution of that, there's things to do, but versus this limiting belief of no, everything's got to be super hard and complicated and all this other stuff. No, it doesn't have to be. It's simple. Declare the I am statements, use the be statements. And what you're missing out on if you're not doing that is you're really missing out on the control of your life. You're going to let your environment dictate how you feel. You've got, the emails, the social media, things other people say to you. And if you're just like not standing guard at the gateway of your mind, you're going to take all those things in and it's going to completely dictate your state. Versus what I do, or there's so many other ways to do it, by the way. It's not just like my David's approach, right? You know what I mean? But there's so many other ways to do it. But at the end of the day, it's about deciding who you are, how you're going to respond, and what outcomes you're going to achieve, regardless of what occurs. It doesn't matter to me. You know what I mean? Like, I've decided in advance. There's not a day that I don't win. I win every day because I've decided that victory is learning. I'm always learning. I'm always growing. Therefore, I'm always victorious. You see what I'm saying? It's a totally different way to free your mind.
You said right in the beginning that you have to be mindful of what you feed your mind, not just feed yourself. And clearly, you are choosing very wisely of what you feed yourself physically as well as intellectually. Moving on to your wonderful occupation right now, you help people structure their business right, start their business, and grow and defend it. I'm sure you've seen people who start and they have done amazingly well, and I'm sure you see people who are kind of not getting anywhere. If we were to pick two or three traits which distinguishes the winners from not so much of winners, what are those in your experience?
Yeah, I think it comes down to are you doing things proactively? Are you planning? Are you strategizing? Or even if you have no clue what this new product, this new service, this new whatever is going to do, you need to make some projections, right? And then we're going to test it. So the amount of planning, not exhaustively where it's like, well, I have to be perfect, right? That's also the extreme opposite. If you have a limiting belief of everything has to be perfect, you'll never do anything, right? So because nothing will ever really be perfect. It's impossible in business, right? As you know. But there does need to be an adequate amount of preparation, right? And if you prepare using your advisor team, there's core advisors that every business needs. The financial advisor, the tax advisor, you have your business or corporate attorney, you have your estate planning attorney, you have your broker, right? I mean, there's the HR side, the staff. I mean, it depends on obviously the business, obviously, but these are the core advisors that every single business owner needs, period, right? They need to cover their core, right? So they need to mitigate their risk. They need to structure their marketing, their sales, their production, whether it's manufacturing or a basic service-based business, it makes no difference. And so if you're not consulting with your advisors and preparing and making that kind of best fit plan, and then just you need to execute. And then you measure and you track and you adjust, right? So those are the things that when I see an entrepreneur that comes in there and they go, David, I got my plan. I'm prepared to execute on it. And I'm going to track it, measure it, and adjust. I'm like, this guy's going to be successful. Maybe it's not the very first iteration of it. Maybe it's not even the second. Maybe it's not the third. I mean, how many loans did it take? How many banks did Walt Disney have to approach before he got the loan to make Walt Disney? Right? I don't remember what it is, 180, 200, it's something really high, right? So how many no's did he have to get that yes? Right? So it's that's another significant factor. How resilient are you? Right? Because if you fold under the first thing of pressure, like when COVID happened, you and I both know a lot, so many businesses that went under just because they used it as an excuse to go under, right? I got a lot of clients of mine that are restaurant owners. And you know that during COVID was a tough time for restaurant owners, right? I don't care where in the world you are, right? It was challenging in some way, shape, or form. Although in Los Angeles, for example, significantly more challenging, right? Because the mayor shut down, you would turn off power. I mean, it's crazy. But the entrepreneur who was looking for an excuse to quit, they did. and they folded. Right? The entrepreneur that said, I'm going to keep going. I'm going to find a way. I'm going to make this happen. Yes or yes. And I see so many restaurant owners that bought up all the opportunities, acquired everybody else that was folding, and they made an unbelievable amount of money. Right? So, I mean, like, what's the difference? It's the mindset. It's that resilience. It's the creativity, right? This is what separates success from failure under 99.99% of the time. It's these things.
So, David, both you and I are parent. We have children, young children. There are many people in the audience who listen to people like you in terms of what do they tell their kids at a time which, broadly speaking, is pretty uncertain these days with AI and political uncertainty, debt levels, war, you name it. There's always good news and bad news, but it seems that there is a reasonable amount of uncertainty right now, even though the stock markets are at all-time high. What should we be telling our kids of what kind of world they should look forward to, and how do we prepare them for it?
Yeah. I can tell you what I tell my kids. You're going to create your world. You're going to create it, right?
I love
Think of it. Think about it. There's always going to be war. There's always going to be disease. There'll always be death. There'll always be something new that can make you miserable. It can make you stressed and can make you just a prisoner in your own mind or your own home or your own business or whatever. There's billionaires who commit suicide because they're so miserable. And then there's people who have absolutely no money that have a complete destitute or whatever, that are the most joyful, happy people that you can ever conceive. I went to Varanasi, India, with the Tony Robbins program, and we went to this area that is fairly low social economic status, and people are going there to die. The happiest people I've ever seen in my life. The happiest people. They've decided what it means to them, right? They have created this meaning to them that is so blessed, so fortunate, so happy to be there to transfer to their next life as they see it, right? So that's what I tell my kids: create what you want, right? Because there will always be opportunities, but there's always opportunity. There's always opportunities to be miserable too. So it's on you to decide what you want in your world and in your life, right? Regardless of what's happening around you, that's kind of thing. So yeah, I love that mentality, and I teach my clients that too. Right? You're going to have adversity. How are you going to respond to that? How will you interpret it? These kinds of things, because that will dictate everything.
So, in keeping with the backdrop of uncertainty and some level of anxiety which some people have, there are people I talk to all the time who have an idea. Either they are struggling in their business or they're struggling in their job. They want to stop the business, they want to end the job, they want to change something, but it's a big decision. And the enormity of that is paralyzing their ability to act. To people like that, someone like you who has seen danger in real battlefield and danger in the business world and is shaping your life the way you choose to, what would you suggest to them? What should they do? What mechanism, what psychology can they use to either achieve or give up or whatever? What's your guidance to them?
Yeah, I think you really have to understand the nature of fear. And I have a background in psychology. That's a lot of my, kind of understanding of this comes from. And I studied in neuroscience labs, and I really love studying the nervous system, the brain, the mechanics that like operate the clock. You know what I mean? And you have to understand what fear is. Okay, fear is a response to your environment that you're, the kind of the background, the base of the brain back here, right, is interpreting as new, is interpreting as different, is interpreting as dangerous. That's what it comes down to, right? And that creates a sensation of fear. If you simply recognize fear as a sensation that you're experiencing, does not mean it has to change anything that you do, right? So people allow fear to shut them down, right? But truly, under most of the time, your brain, your body, your whatever is anchored to where you are now. And anything different than where you are now is different, is dangerous, and therefore you get a fear response, right? So it does not mean you need to change anything, right? You need to simply proceed. So someone who's saying, David, I got this idea, but I don't know when the right time is now, right? There's so much opportunity around you, but it does require you to understand and manage up here, right? Because if you allow fear to control you, number one, you won't do anything, or you'll be so paralyzed. Oh, you just be miserable. Maybe you do proceed. You just push through, but if you don't actually rewire the fear, you're going to be miserable, right? So I would say really, truly understanding the purpose of fear is to keep you safe and that kind of thing. I'm going, well, thank you so much. I'm proceeding anyways. I've done my planning. I understand the risks. I've mitigated the risks. I understand the outcome I'm going for. I have measures in place to achieve the outcomes that I'm wanting, at least as best as I can, right? Reasonably. I've consulted with advisors. I have my plan. I am proceeding, right? And then if it goes or doesn't go the way I want it to, I'm going to figure it out along the way. But I understand my reason for it. It's a good reason. I've got a good purpose for it. I understand the result I'm after, and I'm going to take massive action. I'm sure you know what I'm alluding to, right? So, right. So that methodology, right? The methodology of decision making. That's what an entrepreneur needs to do, or anyone of that matter, an investor, right? Or the CEO that's just an employee, but maybe has a stock option. It doesn't matter what it is. That method of thinking will win you the day. That's what I would say.
Beautiful way of thinking about the future.
Absolutely.
We are almost getting towards the end of our podcast, and we have this wonderful tradition that we ask the guest to leave a question for the next guest. And we try to match them with their background so that we can give a guest a question which is of their area of expertise. So while you think of your question for the next guest, here is the one that we chose for you.
Okay.
We live in times where the global landscape is changing. Safe to say that US might not be the sole superpower anymore. And if anything, the current war is showing that. China is emerging, India is emerging. There are, some old powers coming back, getting some more muscles. There are newer emerging economies, Nigeria, Indonesia, so on. Of course, there is the BRICS countries and all that. It will keep shifting, and we live in interesting times right now. So, from your vantage point, and I'm by no means implying that you are a political analyst, from your vantage point of seeing and understanding and making decisions for yourself and advising people, what would you tell our audience that they should look out for? A couple of things, whether it's in financial scope or where they choose to live or how they choose to live, any of those.
Yeah, I would say this, and like you pointed out, I'm not a international economicist or whatever, right? So, but I would say is challenge your perceived notion of what you think should be done, right? The old school way of thinking, this is long gone, right? If you continue to make like decisions based on methodologies or 50 years ago or whatever, you're going to be in the dust, right? Your business will suffer immensely. Your financial positions will suffer immensely. So number one, challenge the preconceived notions that maybe you were raised under, that you maybe, your culture or whatever, right? So always challenge and assess. But number two, I say, from a financial standpoint, now is the time to really take a look at your positions financially, right? Are you truly diversified in all these different, like you pointed out, these different economies that are resurfacing, that kind of thing? Do you have 8 to 12 uncorrelated assets, right? That it should be a standard, right? Risk loss and these things. So, I mean, with things changing, it's more important than ever to have a very diversified portfolio. And I consider businesses as part of those portfolios, right? So it's not just the private and public equity and those kinds of things, et cetera, debt instruments or whatever. I consider every small business you have, from to everything that's producing income for you. You need to diversify these things, because so many entrepreneurs, they got 90% of their wealth all tied up in the business, and that's a serious mistake. You need to diversify your entire net worth, and like you pointed out, it is a bigger reason than ever to make sure that you have that amount of uncorrelated assets, level of diversification, financial protection, and freedom, so that you're prepared no matter what happens. And then you'll sleep peacefully at night.
And what is the question that you want to leave for the people, for the next guest?
Yeah, I would really love to hear the answer from your next guest based on their legacy. What will their legacy be? And how will this impact the next generation? I think that'll be a fun question.
And do you want to answer it for yourself as well, since it's a great question?
That is a great question. My legacy is going to be that of an advocate, right? My legacy will be challenging these preconceived notions, like I talked about, and really being an advocate for those who have been told things for decades that just are simply not true, right? There's going against the mainstream thought process, for example, with mental health for veterans, for example. So I'm extremely passionate about that, and challenging the notions that this is just the way life is. This is just a thought process that people have. It's just something that they've been taught, but they don't actually understand the truth. And so when someone stands up and leads a culture, a society, a nation or whatever, and that role is needed, and someone stands up. There's so many instances in history when people do that are the most unqualified, the most inexperienced, right? I mean, and they do it because it's needed to be done. So that's what I hope that is going to be what my legacy will be in the best way that I can. And I can't wait to see the outcome.
And before you leave, David, where do people find you? Where can our audience reach out to you?
Absolutely. So my law firm, California Business Formations, you can go to C as in Charlie, A as in Alpha, businessformations.com. Got all my contact information on there with the work that I do and all the trainings and master classes and everything's on that website there. Would be a really good starting point. You can also shoot me an email at info@cabusinessformations.com. If you'd like to connect with me on my work with veterans and mental health and that kind of thing, you can go to warriorsawakening.com, warriors plural, awakening.com, or at mission.freedom.0311. That's on my work again with helping people get the breakthroughs that they need. So that's my handles on social media, et cetera. So there we go.
Thank you so much, David. It is such a pleasure to have been here today. And I'm sure our audience will enjoy this conversation.
I hope that they do. It's been a pleasure for me. Thank you so much. I really hope everyone got a ton of value from some of my messages today, and just look forward to seeing the next steps.
Thanks so much, David.